Hello there. You are someone and I am someone else, or whatever. We're going to talk about my new political ideology, my new political party. I made a YouTube video last time about. I got my little bird friend this time. My warlord is gone, but I do have a bird friend. He'll help me out. And anyway, so my bird friend and me have said, well, how can we integrate the socialists into our new system? See, I'm not a big fan of socialism. I don't agree with the labor theory of value. I don't believe in wage theft. I don't believe in any of that crap that socialists believe in. But despite all the mathematical formulas I could disprove socialists with, we have to at least integrate them in our society because there's too many of them now. So, what do we do? How do we compromise with these socialists? As the, what is it called? The deferred ownership party, or deferred ownership commonwealth, once we've established our political power here in this great land. Well, I say we don't kick the socialists out. We don't be very authoritarian to them, but we give them 15% of every corporation, any publicly traded corporation. Private, I don't want to deal with that. Public, however, the SEC should, hopefully the Securities and Exchange Commission will somehow find a way, or some company, some government-backed corporation, like the Securities and Exchange Commission, will somehow find a way to make sure that the socialists have power. Each trade union, each corporation has 15% of the directors. That's 2 directors for every 12, right? For most corporations in the United States. There's some companies that go up to 15, but most of the time it should be 2 for 12. So there'd be 2 directors for the 12 directors. And then obviously individual shareholders will always get their rights to vote. And then of course index fund investors to the pass-through system, which hopefully I've made a clear sense that it's owned by the freaking people, right? That these sunrise laws that have been used by billionaires and other people like that to maintain control in their shares will no longer be feasible after these billionaires are dead. That's what I want to do. I want to phase in the system, right? Let's say Warren Buffett, he buys out Berkshire Hathaway, which he did, and he makes class distinctions. However, when Warren Buffett goes away, or whoever made the class distinction goes away, that's when the classes will somehow transfer over to everybody having the same dollar amount for voting power. I think we should do that. I don't know how you would do that. I don't know how you would get sunrise laws to exist, or whatever you call it, sunset laws or sunrise laws. I forgot the actual term for giving everyone equal power for every dollar amount you put in. So I don't care if it's Class A or Class B. Whatever dollar amount you should have the equal amount of say. Class A shares should never be 6.6 times more voting power than the freaking Class B shares. I don't care what anyone says about Berkshire Hathaway. But that being said, it's a great company to own. Regardless if you have Class B or Class A, you're still getting profit at the end of the day. You're not going to get a dividend because they don't pay dividends, but you're going to get equity return. And, that's the thing. If you're an index fund investor, right? And then, in my new utopian authoritarian system I've created with these mandatory savings accounts, I plan that everyone, instead of putting Social Security in, it's good 30% is going to be in bonds, but I would say the vast majority of it's going to go in our We the People corporations. All the corporations of the world that are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, whether it be Amazon, Unilever, well, you name it. Berkshire Hathaway, a good example. That the pass-through voting system will make it so that these corporations are democratically controlled. They're not going to be controlled directly by the workers. I think that's stupid. Imagine day one, right? You're day one in the company, right? And you have the same ownership as somebody that worked there for 5 years. No, it's either going to be vested in. If you're going to make a true socialist system, right? If you actually do believe in labor theft value or whatnot, I disagree with it because I believe in subjective theory of value, as many Chicagoans do. Okay, I'm a Chicagoan economist. I'm not an Austrian economist. There's differences between us, capitalists, okay? And then the Keynesians are I would argue they're leaning towards socialism, but they're not there yet, you know what I mean? But that being said, right, me as a Chicagoan economist, or as a Chicagoan theorist, I should say, I'm not really an economist. I don't have training in economics, but I do read a lot of their economic theories. Again, all of it's speculative. I don't think there's any economist that's not speculative, including John Bogle, my favorite economist. He's actually a Keynesian, not even a Chicagoan, but doesn't matter. He's one of my favorites, right? Despite the fact I'm a Boglehead, and I love John Bogle, and I love the Bogleheads in general, I don't agree with everything they say, right? That's what makes me a Chicagoan. Obviously, I have a completely different economic mindset than the Keynesians do. I don't believe that you should use your big tool bag to boost aggregate demand. I disagree with that, but whatever. The socialists don't understand any of those words. They understand theft. They understand, the initial capital is put in and then they own it forever, kind of, supposedly, until that owner dies, which I kind of agree with, actually, as a capitalist, but socialists obviously would disagree with me on that. And, socialists think, they're going to be monopolies forever. But if you look at the last 20 years, right, or even the last 40 years, let's say 40 years, the top 10 companies has changed. Completely changed. You can't say, they're going to be monopolies forever. Yeah, we're ruled by profits, okay. We take over a country for oil, and we don't actually take that much oil if you actually look at the math behind it. Our military-industrial complex is smaller than Procter & Gamble. The socialists don't look at any of the stupid numbers, right? They don't realize that all the defense contractors in the United States make less profit than freaking Procter & Gamble. And by the way, those parts are coming from China. So even if we wanted to be self-reliant, we couldn't be. So I don't think the socialists have any standing, honestly, on their arguments that we're an imperial core and we're taking over countries. I disagree with that entirely. That being said, obviously we do things for Israel. I don't know why we do things for Israel. Israel's a very technologically advanced country. They can do things on their own. I think it would be dumb to completely abandon them, but I also think it would be dumb to fund them to oblivion, so we end up falling. And that's what we're doing, actually, kind of. Slowly. We're not doing it that much. It's not really. It's less than 1% of the budget, but still pretty bad, actually. Most of our foreign aid, I think, is only less of. It's not a very high percentage of the budget. In fact, U.S. aid just got cut. Almost every country got cut U.S. aid, so a lot of African countries are suffering now. That being said, we're gonna talk more about. I went off on a tangent. Wow, that's great. I love going on tangents. It's great. We will give 15% ownership of every labor union, every publicly traded corporation. I think that's more than enough fair for the socialists, especially since the Nordic model actually relies on that. If you look at Norway, Denmark, Sweden, they believe in hierarchies. I believe in hierarchies. Me and the Nordic countries, who are kingdoms, by the way, they believe in natural hierarchy of their government. We're hierarchists. We believe that hierarchy exists, and we're meritocratic hierarchists. In one thing, we believe in hierarchy of merit. I'm not going to pay, underprivileged doctor who hasn't performed the surgery over a doctor who has a 100% success rate who's done 30 surgeries. Inequality is built in to our mind. It's built in. The hierarchy is built into our mind. You can never get rid of it. And any chance to do that will actually make a more severe hierarchy, right? If you think about it, right? You let government control things instead of corporations competing for your dollar, right? Corporations can be very evil. Let's give it that, right? I'm not going to say Nestle polluting water. Yeah, it's pretty evil, right? Let's just say you have the government do it. And they pollute the water. Well, there's no way to check on the government. The government has monopoly of force. Government has monopoly of force. It's just, I think I'd rather have Nestle somewhat control some of the water, not all of it, obviously. If they do, then they should be sued to oblivion if they have over 90% of the supply. So be sued to oblivion, which they don't. They'll never will, because I don't think Nestle has the power to do that. Plus, they're a Swiss corporation. They just have the power in Switzerland, I guess, to do that crap. And Switzerland probably wouldn't tolerate that crap for much longer. But, let's say, for instance, that, I don't know, you have government-run things, right? Instead of corporations run things. DMV is a good example of government running things. Very, very slow, 90% of the time. Every time I go in, there's lines out the wazoo. It's terrible, right? Absolutely freaking terrible. Look at the DMV in Pennsylvania. It's privatized. DMV is really quick. There's very little lines. It works wonders. There's no government employees you have to deal with. They're all privately managed. Very, very nice system they got going on. So you want the competition. If you want to do taxpayer healthcare, I'm actually for it. Like, I'm okay with welfareism. Like, I like the Nordic model. The problem is Americans don't realize what sacrifice the Nordic countries use. Yeah, we spend more on our GDP for healthcare. That's absolutely true. But would you want the government to be more involved in healthcare? Like, I generally do think about it for a few moments, right? Some of these countries, there are waiting lines. I don't know if the Nordic countries, but I do know in Germany and in the United Kingdom, people complain a lot. People are waiting months just to get the cancer screenings before they realize, I have cancer. There's no doctor that comes in. You have to go to their place and you're waiting. And then you sign their little form and they come back in a few months. But by the time you get your cancer diagnosis, you're dying of cancer. So at least in our system, you could pay, and yeah, you'll be in medical debt. But I would rather be in medical debt and know what's wrong with me, because health is wealth, more than actual finance, in my opinion, than to be in the German system I'm trying to make arguments against socialists. Obviously, this isn't working out very well, but our healthcare system used to be a lot better before the 1970s. If you look at it wasn't Ronald Reagan that caused the healthcare to go up. I hate when people bring up one guy, like he was the one exception that made healthcare go up. He may have. Okay, let's just take it on their word that he may have. However, I disagree with that entirely. I think it was something else. I think it was a congressional act that was passed during that time that maybe he just wasn't looking. Ronald Reagan, and this is a little bit before Ronald Reagan. This was Richard Nixon, actually. Some legislation. What was it? Forcing a bunch of random surgeries in a bunch of insurance plans. Yeah, that will probably jack up the price of insurance. Yeah, and then having insurance companies dictate the price of medicine for medical companies, and then them communicating with each other. Yeah, that's also gonna. Yeah, it's just a terrible system. So you need a separation between government and medical, because what's happening is when you put the two together, you create adverse incentives where healthcare prices go up. Before government and healthcare used to be $1 or one person's daily wage, or like for the whole year you paid 1 day's worth of wage. Now you pay like 12 for healthcare. It's crazy to me that healthcare has gone up 12 times compared to what the average person makes. Obviously we make way better and luxurious salaries, and healthcare is a lot better in terms of the technology and the diagnosing. But it's just, the socialists don't know what they're talking about. They say, people were dying in the streets back then. By the way, Social Security didn't even count for, only 1% even qualified for Social Security back then. Because when it was passed, 65 was actually a very, very unreal age to get there. And if you got there, you lived an extra 2 years at 67. Social Security wasn't going to be there the entire time. Now they use it as retirement because people live past 65. It seems like we should probably actually increase the Social Security system. Increase the age. But that's my opinion. In fact, in my plan, if you go past age 72 and you qualify for the maximum benefit of Social Security, you actually can't be in the government. So that's something me and the socialists would probably get along with, is having rotating politicians, even if they believe that the politicians are corrupt. And yeah, a good 1/3 of them, or even probably more than half, are very, very corrupt. It's probably very hard to get in there without being corrupt. I'm certain there's a handful that are. But again, like a central hierarchy, do you want one hierarchy running everything, or do you want multiple hierarchies competing to run everything? I think I want the latter. I think I want multiple hierarchies. In fact, my entire political system is going to compromise with the socialists. Okay, the socialists say the president has too much power. Absolutely, I agree. Let's give the United States a prime minister. The socialists say, okay, we don't have labor unions or our corporations. Okay, let's give them 50% of the vote. Oh no, that's too low. We need it 100%. No, that's ridiculous, because the guy who goes in day one has the same voting power as the person that comes in later, unless there's a vesting schedule, which I don't know how you would do that in a social society, but okay, let's just say there's a vesting schedule. Let's say you got to do 90 days to be fully invested in ownership of the company. Okay, at that point, you've been exploited enough. Okay, you can now own 100% of that part share of the company after 90 days. Okay, do a vesting schedule. At that point, Like, I don't know how these socialists think. It's almost like the worker, like my brother always says this quote, almost like the worker should own the means of production. I'm like, well, my ideal is that everyone owns the means of production. And I don't think we should use workers' rights to exploit society's rights, you know what I mean? Or to have, because like people will say, oh, this is the most contradictory thing about socialism. Obviously, I've always said this in most of my YouTube videos, is, you know, oh, the labor union's going to look out for the workers. But just because they're going to look out for the workers doesn't mean they're going to look out for society. What if they're an oil union, right? And they drill oil. You think they're going to look out for society? No, they're not. Oh, we're going to force everyone to join the union. Well, that's pretty dumb because that's not democratic. It's, you know, obviously my system isn't very democratic either, but you can theoretically vote for my pass-through system. You're not going to be forced to vote, right? It's not going to be a referendum where you're forced to vote. But it is going to be a system where you have the option to, in my 70% index fund system. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know if I could appease the socialists any more than I have. I probably pissed them off by talking about this stuff. But I'm at least trying, right? I'm trying to get in the hearts and minds of socialists. They always talk about imperial cores. I've always heard that term. I always hear, oh, the Israel thing, okay. Obviously, it's pretty controversial. Probably shouldn't have talked about it, but I did anyway. I don't hate Israel. I don't love Israel. They're just the country, like any other. They're just like Palestine. There's like Jordan. There's like Lebanon. There's like any country in that area, right? They're the same thing. Just speak Hebrew instead of Arabic. It doesn't really matter to me. Obviously, there's some cultural differences, you know. There's some Arabic speakers in Israel. Israel proper's got 21% Arabic speakers. You know, it's not a big deal, but people don't really care or understand the plights of Arabic speakers in freaking Israel. No one cares. No one understands. No one cares. You know, it's just like, okay, it's just like the socialists will completely disregard everything I bring up, or what they do, it will be like very haphazard. That being said, hopefully you enjoyed how we would convince the socialists to go with our plan. First off, it's owned by the people. Any publicly traded company, private companies are off limits. Mars Company, Chick-fil-A, they haven't decided to go join the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission. So, since they haven't filed with them, it's not really a big deal. So yeah, in my system, most companies that are the biggest are publicly traded companies. Who knew? And who's going to own them? The people. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it through pass-through voting instead of managerial capitalism. I think pass-through capitalism will be the best thing for us going forward. And we've just, in the last 4 years, I've looked at Vanguard and BlackRock have both introduced a way to do pass-through voting. And I want to do it for the government as well. I want our government-sponsored accounts to do it. And we have something to inherit. Like, if you're an adult, you can actually give your Social Security to your child. This is what I want. And the Social Security can be used for the middle age of that child once they reach the age of majority, which will be another thing I will talk about in my next episode. So I really am coming up with a new economic and political sphere that the socialists just don't think about. They don't think about deferred ownership Commonwealth, the deferred ownership party. They don't care about my political party. They don't care about my political campaign. They don't know about it. I'm a nobody. You know, I'm a guy with light skin hair. What kind of hair color is this? What kind of rat bastard haircut? What, the freaking ancestors must have had some crazy hair. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Me and my bird friend are actually going to enjoy the sun. Hopefully you enjoyed what we would do to convince the socialists to join our party. If they don't want to join our party, I totally understand. We're your red-blooded capitalists here. You know, but we are deferred owner capitalists. We are different from every other capitalist. Anyway, I hope that helps.